1. Fingers crossed. Hopes and prayers. Everything's working now. The stream has finally begun. So, Truth Seekers, I want to welcome you. I just said earlier on the stream that didn't work that there's some new kinks that they've worked out in YouTube. Hopefully I've got all the problems fixed here, but I'm very fortunate to have a guest that I've been following for a while online. He is an expert in all things related to education and, oh, here we go. In education and helping kids achieve their best potential. His name is Bruce Deitrick Price. He is the founder of ImproveEducation.org. And as I said before, I've been following him for several months and read a whole bunch of his articles online. Bruce Deitrick Price, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. How are you, sir? So for those who are wondering why they should listen to what you have to say, I just want to throw out a little plug for you that I've been reading you probably for about 3 months. On American Thinker alone, I think you have maybe 4 or 5 dozen articles, and all the ones I've read have been absolutely stellar. I'm going to put a little clip up here on the screen so people can see them. Some of the work that you've done. The most recent one that I liked was K-12, A Literate New World. You've also got How Our Schools Make Monsters. If you could take 30 seconds and just let us know what the thesis is of your worldview, what is that? Sure. So if someone just tunes in and says, hey, these are wild accusations, you're probably a crazy left or right wing bigot who just hates teachers, I need to share a little bit of a story. I went to a Red for Ed rally over the weekend, my very first one. I went to do a Man on the Street event. It was the Invest for Ed in Arizona. Are you familiar with that at all, Bruce? Well, originally it was Red for Ed, which was to get the teacher, it was to strong arm the taxpayers into paying the teachers more money. And I know it was in Arizona, there were some other states that participated, but it was a national walkout. And the follow-up to that this weekend was Invest for Ed, where they went to collect signatures in order to get the state of Arizona to cough up $690 million in additional funding for a couple different things. Smaller class sizes, dropout prevention, which I'm not sure how you do that with $700 million, and some other various items that supposedly are going to help the students. So I went out there with a camera and a microphone and said, look, I've got this study from the Cato Institute citing the Department of Education's numbers that since 1970, the quality of education has either flatlined or declined, despite the fact and you can see the global warming charts, I'm doing the hand motions here, the spending and the teacher staff numbers have skyrocketed. If there's been no correlation in the past, why do we just assume that $700 million is going to fix the problem? And I had some really interesting conversations, especially with the people who can't defend what they think. They know they want the money. They know they're certain that it's going to increase the output of the students. But as educators, they couldn't educate me as to any evidentiary reason how that's going to happen. Give us a little more detail about Dewey. I think most people who aren't quote-unquote educators maybe aren't familiar with some of the ideas that he had, or the fact that he went to the Soviet Union and got a ticker tape parade for being a genius in terms of education. But under the Dewey system, our children have not exactly flourished over the last 30 years. Education scores have dropped globally. The system as a whole, and when I say dropped, I mean from number 1 to in the 20s in math and reading, and around 40 in math, 25 or 26 in science and reading. What part of that do you contribute to Dewey and his attitude towards schooling? Sure. Sure.
So I actually put it on the site. It's very moving. I mean, it was a great fan letter, so to speak, but he was obviously a smart, tough guy. But he admitted he wouldn't have known how to deal with these people, how to engage them, if he didn't have the articles that I'd been putting in American Thinker.
Interesting. You touch on a couple things. Sorry to interrupt you, but constructivism. I think a lot of people are going to hear that and not really be sure what that is. And I need to make sure we talk about sight words, Because my oldest
Yeah,
is 8.
well, let's do the constructivism.
Sure.
It took me a year to be able to understand it or think I understood it, because it talks about creating new knowledge, and you say, what the hell? What are you talking about? Is that what a kid is doing in the first grade? He's creating new knowledge? What does that phrase even mean? I mean, really, I was in a motel. They actually hired me to curate an art show up in Long Island. I'm up in the motel at 3 o'clock in the morning. I still remember, and I was thinking, create new knowledge. What the hell does it mean? Anyway, long story short, they do not let teachers teach anymore because students are supposed to create their own new knowledge. In other words, you tell the kid the American Revolution, you're the teacher, you have to shut up. You stay in the back of the room and smile encouragingly. But basically, we expect the students to go on the internet and create their own new knowledge, which might just mean checking in, Wikipedia. But the point is, the teacher already knows all the background of the American Revolution, can teach you the whole thing in a half hour and an hour, the big picture.
Sure.
I could do that easily in an hour.
Right.
And I'm just an amateur historian. But the point is, how does an 8 or 10 or 12-year-old without any context or background, how are they supposed to go out and study anything? It wouldn't even matter if it was something confined like the heart or something. You just can't do it. It's much more efficient to have people lecture. I mean, I'm lecturing, your audience right now, and that's the fastest way. I can't say to you, well, why don't you go and get on the internet? You'll be able to figure it. You would think I was, a fool. Well, the whole school system is foolish in that exact way. They actually I've gotten letters from teachers, the saddest letters I've ever gotten. These young women who are trying to be teachers, and they are on probation for a year, and finally the principal calls them in and said, you insist on teaching facts. We don't allow that. This is a constructivist school. You can't work here.
I'll be honest, Bruce, when you say stuff like this, it sounds like someone made it up and put it in an article to get clicks. Like, tell me
Good point.
Is that really happening? Because that's
intense. Well, on my website, improveeducation.org, there's I think one article, one section is called Letters from Teachers, and it was 2 of them I got. I love these things because the woman was telling all these specific details about the moon, the craters on the moon, and she used the phrase compass rose. And I realized that I, a middle-aged intellectual, didn't even know what a compass rose is, and she was teaching her second graders.
Sure.
I assume it's that thing over in the corner that shows north, east, southwest, right?
Yeah, well, I'm pulling up Letters from Teachers now. It'll be showing on the screen.
You don't even know it either. I don't know it. I never had any reason to know it. But the point is, these second graders were all eager. They knew their geography. They were all excited because, see, knowledge is exciting. I'm amazed constantly at all the quiz shows. Snoop Dogg's got one. Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't.
Did you know Snoop Dogg? He's a rapper. Snoop Dogg actually has a quiz show. What would it be? Well, you'd have to find. I don't want to mislead people, but it's out there, and he's famous.
Are You Smarter Than a Rapper? Is that what it's called? No, it's 5th grader. That was a different show.
Yeah. No, I know how you got that, but that's not what it is. He's just a colorful guy, and he presides over it with just the right amount of authority and weight, and
sure.
And he's So now see, that's constructivism. Teachers cannot teach. It's unbelievably stupid. The only person in the room who knows anything is the teacher, and they don't know very much, and now they have an excuse not to know even that much. So constructivism all by itself, that's the thing about these gimmicks. Constructivism all by itself, if you didn't do anything else, will destroy a school system. Self-esteem all by itself will destroy a school system. It'll paralyze it. All of this stuff, I'm writing something now about these. You know anything about these wasps? They lay their eggs on the caterpillar. You ever seen it?
Don't, but I went to public school. There's a lot I don't know. So
well, I learned this in the wilds of West Virginia, but there's also there's a couple others. They're parasites, and they put their eggs on a weaker animal, and the weaker animal, the eggs eat up the host, while they grow. It's pretty grim, pretty gross. But that's what our school system is like. These people are parasites living on the destruction they're doing to the children. So, I don't want to get all biblical about it, but the people, it's just, I don't want to say anything you'll regret.
Well, let me put some context on this. For anyone wondering how a school could be compared to a parasite, and I saw this at Red for Ed, right? You've got regular average teachers, people that you know, people in your neighborhood, people that are your friends, wondering why they're being criticized. So I'd say, look, do you have friends that are teachers? Do you have mom and dad? Do you go to public school? Well, then you can't criticize us. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just saying. I know all those things. If the Department of Education came out and said that the grant program from 2010 to 2015, this is in the Washington Post, said that they sent $7 billion of taxpayer money into the program between 2010 and 2015 for the block grant program. The DOE report found no correlation between the two. But what they did find is that our average spending for the last, I don't know how many years, has tripled from whatever it was to $150,000 per student to get through K-12. What are we getting for that money? Then it starts to paint the picture of maybe there is this whole parasitic relationship, considering that we're getting less for every dollar that we spend and have historically over the last 40 years. I also want to talk about, you mentioned the teachers not being qualified. I didn't know this.
Okay,
Yeah,
by the way, I'm glad you gave me this opening, because I get in a lot of trouble in this area because teachers are very touchy. They're being picked on by everybody, and I never talk about teachers. I just did that one time, but that's because I've seen many articles about it. Sure. I didn't make that up. I'm always talking about the educational establishment. That means people with PhDs, professors with PhDs in education, probably never been a teacher in their life. I have the same respect and interest in teachers, but they're foot soldiers. They don't make policy decisions. It's like, hating, being mad at a soldier because we have a war in Vietnam. I mean, it's stupid, and I do get these irate comments from teachers, and they're very touchy, and it's like if you and I were talking at a bar and we start talking about education, this woman comes, or could be a man, from the other end of the bar and says, "Why are you criticizing me?" Now, I think that's just a little over the top. I mean, lady, I don't know you, and I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the school system in a huge country with 325 million people or whatever it is now. And really, the people, it's like the banking establishment. These are the very top people. I think in America, there's probably only 500 people making all the decisions for everything. And there might only be 5 people, because these are very cold-blooded, smart people. I mean, the people at the Federal Reserve who set the interest rates and all that, I mean, how many of those people actually are there who can understand how you would set an interest rate and what it should be? I can't talk on that subject, but I just see that our school policies are irrational, and I think there's only a few people smart enough to. It's like with Obama; he was always pushing it. He apparently pushed too far because he made Trump possible. But in the school system, there's nobody to push back. But they do lose sometimes, by the way. We did stop Common Core.
I was going to say that was one of the points I made. Just to be fair with the teachers that are there, because, of course, they feel attacked. I said, look, if there was a student union, FDR was a big fan of unions, but he was reluctant to say that public sectors should have unions because it pits the taxpayer against the people who get their money extracted in exchange for serving them. He didn't like public school unions or public unions. And you look at the teachers and say, if there was a counter union, who would it be? It would be the students. And if the students and teachers both had unions, I doubt they would agree on very much. So I always feel bad when there's kids out there marching with the teachers, because I don't think it's in their best interest. I want to give an example, because you're talking about a lot of things this cabal of educators does at the top. Let's talk about something my son is doing right now, which I agree with you is kind of a joke. Sight words. You've written a lot about them. Tell me why they're nonsense.
Okay, when languages started, they were all symbol languages, like Egyptian hieroglyphics. You wanted a bull, you drew a picture of a bull, and then all those sign languages, and Chinese became one of those. They're graphic symbols, just like the boy and the male and female symbol on the bathroom doors.
Sure.
You don't read them in the sense that you sound them out. You just see it, and we also see the UN flags. 200 of those would be a huge job. Currency symbols. I've published an article about it, maybe on American Thinker. I don't know where it is, but there's only about 50 major currency symbols, and for somebody to get to the point where they can recognize them instantly and work on the money desk all day, that's a lot of work. Well, when you go to a public school, they expect you to do 50 to 100 words the first year, and you might or might not do that. But then next year there's another 100, and next year there's another 100. You're still illiterate, and meanwhile your brain is getting scrambled. And the beautiful part about this is in 1926, Dr. Samuel Orton, a real neurologist, got a Rockefeller grant, and the bosses up in the education department expected Orton to prove the sight words worked. This was the beginning of Look, Say, and Dick and Jane and all that, which was introduced in 1931.
Sure.
But to everybody's surprise, and even Dr. Orton, he proved, and it's all in this article you can find, Orton, O-R-T-O-N, Samuel Orton, he proved that not only does this method not work, but it will screw up their brains. Cognitive damage, long-lasting effects, and that's exactly what it does. And they call that long-lasting effect dyslexia, and other names to distract from the fact that if you give a kid a visual symbol, they're really very hard to lock in. Most of us, if we had to memorize 5-digit phone numbers on sight, it's very difficult. Sue Dixon, somewhat famous because she invented the what is it, spell thing, read, write. It's one of the best phonics programs. And the parents were coming up to her and saying, "Oh, my kids can do this, and kids can do that." And Sue Dixon looks at her and said, "You ever try to memorize a license plate?" Of course it's easier, to do it the right way, but if you do it the hard way, it's like memorizing license plates. It's very difficult.
So I'm going to throw my anecdotal evidence for this, because I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and my 8-year-old is a great reader, one of the best in his class or school, because we practice with him a lot. But I've noticed every now and then I'll say, "What does that word say?" and he will miss it by a mile. And I don't mean just get.
Well, that's it. Okay, now you just proved the whole thing.
It says.
Oh, you mean, but he did know it the previous week?
Yeah, or if it's close to a word he knows, like I'll say, "Hey, what does that car say?" And it'll be Civic or Vizio or even a short word, and he'll just say the wrong letters. And I'll think, you would think he was speaking a different language. And I always get frustrated. I'm like, how do you not know the word? You know words much more difficult. I believe it's sight words.
So you've been teaching him sight words?
No, well, he brings them home every day from school.
Well, the answer is, for everybody listening, and because you don't want to get the kid, being a center of attention or creating art. What's her name? Such a nice woman. The phonics. Oh boy, her name is Elizabeth Brown, I think. Anyway, she wrote an article that I've quoted and referred to, where she said, "Just teach them to sound out the words phonetically. Don't tell the teacher what you're doing. How do they know?" The people hold up the word. Your kid knows how to read it phonetically. Boom, safe. Then you can't screw with them. But if all they're doing is memorizing the shape of a word, English is all. Look at this is one of the things I've gotten in a lot of my articles. Take a page in any book, turn the book upside down, and then read it in the mirror. You will see the biggest thicket of just random, what looks like total nonsense. See, the problem with the way they can get away with this gimmick is adults already know how to read. So they think, "Oh, well, what the hell, I learned how to read. They're these little simple words. What's the problem?" But those aren't little simple words for a kid. I read a woman saying that even in the 4th grade, her kids were confusing is and the. And that's when it's like a tree falling on you. Like you were saying, a word the kid already knows. In the 4th grade, people are confusing is and the. So they didn't even have the simplest words locked in. And I'll tell you another thing. They tell the kids that the, T-H-E, is a sight word. Well, when it's the, it might be a bit of a sight word. But it's T-H-E, the, it rhymes with 300 words, and it's purely phonetic. And even when it's a sight word, if you insist on the thing, that TH is a very important sound in English language. It's 500 words from the Greek theory and that kind of word, and it's 500 words from the Old English thug and that kind of word. I mean, you just tell the kid this thing called a TH. It's very hard to say, by the way, French, but you got to stick your tongue out, and your tongue comes back in, and you kind of spit it out. You master that sound. You look for it. Anytime you see a TH, it's going to be that sound. Now you've mastered hundreds of words all in one stroke. That's the genius of phonics. That's the genius of any kind of intelligent approach to reading. Learning and memorizing sight words is virtually impossible unless you happen to have a very good photographic memory. There are people who do. That's why it's hard to make these generalizations. But it's safe to say that 99% of kids will not be good readers if they memorize sight words. And they're still sending them home. They're still, like you just said to me, your kids are what I would call hopeless victim, helpless. They are abused kids thanks to your public school system. But you don't have to get in a fight with your public school system unless you want to. I would just say teach the kids how it works. Hey, the reason these symbols are here, it's not random. It's not like somebody scribbled with a I don't know, paint gun. No, you know what I mean? The letters all have a history. They all have a sound that goes with them. So even the simplest thing, like let's say it's run, R-U-N, that you say, oh by the way, everything I could. Each thing you ask me, it makes me think of 10 other things. But
Sure.
There's a lot. I'm writing an article now about how to teach. I know. Here's the thing I can tell people. A guy in Australia named J.J. Jenkins did this wonderful phonics song, too. It has, it's some incredible number you wouldn't even believe. Billions of people have looked at this one video because it's a little song that goes, A is for apple, apple, B is for ball, ball. And people are letting their kids just listen to that every day for 2 weeks, and the kids are never going to be able to get away from it. And I would say that's your answer. And they don't have to explain that to the kid. The worst thing is if you tell your teacher that you're teaching them phonics, they'll say, that doesn't work, our research. And they actually tell parents that. But if the kid already understands it, once they grasp that phonics concept, They don't have to get into all those details about the differences. They're always trying to say it's a non-phonetic language. The lies that our educators, our so-called, I hate that word, educators should be people like John.
I don't like it either.
And in fact, and me, I'm an educator.
Sure.
Because I
Parents
talk about
are
it.
educators.
I don't actually do it, you know.
Parents are educators. To me, I said parents are educators. To me, it reminds me of when the TSA complained that they had embroidered badges instead of real ones. They said, we're not law enforcement officials until we have brass badges. So they all had to get real badges, and now the police are upset. To me, it's just another exercise in pretend authority, but that's my opinion. Can you hear the video, the alphabet video on your feed? Can you hear anything?
No, I don't have any feed right now.
Okay, just checking.
But my screensaver came on, and I've been working on this thing.
Well, no, I pulled up the J.J. Jenkins video, and it's actually, I'm going to use this for my kids, because we've talked about this. They bring home the sight words, and I think in one of your articles you said that they learn 100 in kindergarten or first grade. Then they learn 100 the next year. By the time
wait a minute, that's the goal.
Right. If they're good, they learn 100, right? So they get out of school.
Yeah, but the average kid, I don't think, ever masters 100. If by master you mean automaticity, which means instantaneous identification. I think it's actually very difficult. You know the way it is, like when you and I are watching a movie and you say, who's that guy there, the second banana and the Star Trek thing, and I say, oh yeah, that's, and both of us sitting there saying, we know the name, we've heard it 1,000 times, we love this guy, we look with a great actor, it's Shatner or somebody, you know what I mean, or it's Sean Connery.
You're like, he got nominated for an award 3 years ago, he was in Goodfellas, we know who he is.
But we can't bring it up, and that's what sight word readers are dealing with all day long, and for a few seconds here and a few seconds there. So if you think about it, even a slow reader reads 200 words a minute, and that's 3 words a second. Think how fast that is. The brain is cranking this stuff out. The moment you slow down for 2 or 3 seconds to get the sight word recognition, your speed is gone to hell. You're going to be a frustrated, slow reader who hates reading. That's why there's all these teenage boys. It's a whole interesting subject between boys and girls, but boys are definitely more damaged, and they are less patient. And so finally, at some point in the 2nd or 3rd grade, boys snap, and they kind of say, this is stupid, I'm not going to do it anymore, and just something, they give up. They're not going to put up with crap from women making them memorize stuff you can't memorize. Because in the 1st grade, they're all eager and enthusiastic, ready to go. Boys are, defined by their, at least I would say this, confidence, cockiness. I can do anything. I can jump off the roof like Superman. That's the way boys think. And then there they are, stuck in a class, asked to do something that they can't do. And the frustration is so great, and that's why they get all these kids on Ritalin and blah, blah, blah. I can go for hours on that.
Well, let me paint a picture on that, because I read a good article you wrote about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and you talked about how basically they train certain characteristics out of these kids. And I titled the stream, Why Janet Can't Read, after the book that you cited in this article. But there's also some facts that I used at the Red for Ed rally. Certainly the most recent education report card, there's an organization called the NAEP. It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And in 2018, it was released for last year. So this is pretty recent. It said that 37% of 12th graders, girls and boys, tested proficient or better in reading. 25% in math. And what's really interesting is Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell write about how among black students, the numbers are 17% and 7%. So you've got 7% of kids proficient in math, 17% who like to read. And in your article, you said, or it might have been a different article, just that it's gone horribly wrong, and now we're producing people who have no enjoyment of reading, who don't have the benefits of reading, who don't want to do it going forward, who are mal-educated. And in the case of the boys, like you said earlier, if you memorize 2,000 sight words by the time you get out of school, an articulate, educated person might use 150,000 to 200,000. They've got a lifetime gap of just basic phonics and comprehension that they'll never make up. And furthermore, I read before the rally that the Fortune 500, Forbes says that they spend $3 billion a year in the Fortune 500 teaching remedial English skills to their employees. It blew my mind.
Good God, wait a minute, $3 billion?
Yeah, I can send you the link.
That's extraordinary. Now, why does the business community put more pressure? There's something weird going on right there. The Chamber of Commerce is slack. All the main voices that should be protecting us. Where are the black leaders on this? Where are the Christian leaders? Where are our foundations? I went to Princeton. I'm very disappointed in Princeton. You know what they just did at Princeton? They've got something called a eviction lab. And so now I read about them in the local paper that somebody can't pay their rent, so then the eviction lab gets into studying. I'm thinking Princeton won't bother to come and tell Norfolk how to improve its bad schools, and they're known for bad schools. But they will try to meddle in our commercial activity. See, that's your left-wing university. This is my somewhat prejudiced judgment on this thing, but I hate to see it slide that way. I mean, why couldn't some this is just something I made up, but in 1955, when Flesch wrote his book, if the chairman of the English departments at Princeton, Harvard, and Yale had stood on the steps of the Library of Congress and we support Rudolf Flesch. That's all you need to know in this book. Save your kids by reading this book. They could have saved the whole country 50 years, 75 years of misery. There wasn't a peep out of those people who should be protecting the culture. But it's the same to me with black leaders. Why the black kids are being walked all over. The education establishment will wreck the kids who are least offended. Well, if you got a single mother who's got a bad job and wasn't that well educated, how can she understand any of this stuff? You got middle class educated parents who don't understand what's going on. So the school seems to respond to kids when they're protected. It lets up. But if they are not protected, then it's just full speed sight words and dumbing down.
But the answer is always, and this is the reason I went to the rally, the answer is always, we just need more money. And I think that's the connection between the two you mentioned. Even the teachers that are there. I mean, I'll give you an example of something that really frustrated me. Walter Williams wrote about how the biggest problem with education is the people in the position to fix it at the ground level in the trenches are not being taught the skills to fix it. And he basically said that of the majors programs in universities, I think there were 36 or 38, that the educational degree is ranked near 30th in terms of the skills and overall ability for people to change the issue. I forget the exact word he used, but he basically said...
What is that, the master's in education?
Yeah, it's an education degree, and he even said that there are a lot of private schools who quietly will admit that they will not hire educators with education degrees. They have to have a very specific discipline degree.
That tells you everything you need to know. That woman wrote a really nice book in 1990, roughly, called Ed School Follies. Still an excellent book about how they don't teach them anything. They get them ready for being bad teachers.
Yeah, so at that point, I mean, it's a hard conversation to have because these are people we do care about and sympathize with. But there's articles in here about how in Atlanta they had teachers who failed remedial 9th grade math and English tests over a dozen times and still got work. I mean, there's sites to these studies, and I think, I never hear about any of this stuff. And by the way, why isn't Red for Ed even bringing it up? Because I asked one lady and said, I'm just curious if, here's an example. When I would say, hey, look, I'm curious how $790 million is going to do something this time that's never done in the past. Our scores are on the slide. Globally, we're falling behind countries that spend far less than we do. And the answer I got from the sincere people was, well, hopefully what's going to happen, I heard that 3 times in a row. Well, hopefully, and I thought, there it is. Thoughts and prayers, hopes and feelings. That's how we're going to fix this. That and $800 million.
It really is facts and knowledge. I came down to that little simple formula, but facts and knowledge, facts are fun and knowledge is power. That's a formula I've been using from the beginning. The education establishment thinks facts are dull and knowledge is not going to do a thing for you, so you might as well stay dumb. I mean, these people, anyway, the point is, if you want to change the school system, you got to learn a little about how it works, get a little bit interested. Now, all those articles on American Thinker, I think it's 100 now, they have an archive button up at the top, and you can find anybody, my name is there by the article, it's underlined, and so you go to that link, and it lists all the titles of all those 100 things.
I've got them up right now.
In my case, you just enter Bruce Deitrick Price, and whatever thing you're interested in, Bruce Deitrick Price Phonics, Bruce Deitrick Price Constructivism, and Google will do all the work of showing you 2, 3, 5, 10 articles, and then you can just see if you find something interesting. And the book I came out last year is called Saving K-12, and basically it's intended to be kind of a reformer's guide or a blueprint to saving the public school system. It's easy to read because it was all written as articles over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and now it deals with the main subject of reading and this, that, and the other. Very good book, I think. The only criticism, I guess, people who are teachers, they might say, well, you're a little tough on us, aren't you? I said, no, I didn't write about you. You are not educated. I mean, really, the idea that, like, I'm a soldier, I was a soldier in the Army once, but the idea that I'm the military, I mean, it would be a joke. I mean, you would laugh at me for being an egomaniac and crazy, but teachers seem to think they are education, and I don't want to be rude, but I want to be just a little rude because that is absurd. Give yourself a break. Don't blame education on you. You didn't do what John Dewey did. John Dewey did it to you. I could think teachers and parents and students are all equally victims I say this over and over and over. I don't know if anybody understands the point I'm making, to lump in teachers with the parents and students. They're all victims of inferior, inefficient methods of education. And I think we could do so much more. I think with all the new digital tools, we would have a golden, I just wrote this on Quora 2 days ago, we would have a golden age of education right now, because we would teach in facts and knowledge, but we'd be teaching them much faster. So another thing to defend my approach on this is when you look at what's difference between they talk about this all the time, the inequality and all that, you know what I mean, and the middle class and rich kids, they sit around the table talking about stuff to people, and the poor kid doesn't hear anybody talking about anything. And so what's the answer? The answer is very simply, in those first few months, we got to do a crash course on all the stuff that the kid needs to know and doesn't. Like, what's a zip code? What's an area code? What's a time zone? All the stuff that you just hear every day, if a normal person, and you could do all that. You can teach a fact every hour. It's no big deal. A year goes by and the kid will know all those hundreds of facts, and now you've got the kid caught up. They could. That's what they should have done. And what was it called? Head Start. There's $1 trillion just waste of money, because the people in charge saw it as a way to make money, but they didn't see it as a chance to really actually do anything. Wow, I can say I'm sorry, I'm a weird.
Well, no, it's all right.
I know stuff, but I can go on. I can talk all day without even thinking about it, because I've written I've written 500 articles actually, because I put them in other places. It's a nice site called Renew America. They take Canada Free Press, LinkedIn, Republic Standards, a new one, Renew Free Republic. It's just a lot of different places wherever I get a relationship with something, it's nice. And Canada Free Press is a very intelligent site, and the woman who runs it, Judy, very smart, very nice to me. And I asked her, I said, look, I'm having this book come out. Do you want to say anything about it? And she wrote back and said, every parent is worried about the state of school. Nobody knows more about it than Bruce Price. Boom. That's the woman who knows how to write newspaper copy. I mean, she didn't him and haw around it. She just said, everybody's worried about it. Bruce Price knows the answer, so go there. And I mean, she doesn't know me. I don't know her. This is just a professional relationship on the internet. I sent her articles. So anyway, that was an exciting thing.
I opened up your Amazon page. What I typically like to do when I have guests on is I'll have them respond to some of the negative comments about their work, because I think these are hilarious. And the one-star one.
The Amazon page? Where's that? Have I been there? I don't even know what it is.
I don't know. Well, there's a really long one basically saying that John Dewey was not interested in cookie-cutter children who sustained the rigors of core subjects. He wanted to integrate humanity into the curriculum because he saw humanity as the currency to success. It could be learned.
Is this a book? Is this a book review on Saving
This is
K-12,
someone countering your Saving K through 12 gave you a 1-star review. He said that your claim.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I got 2 really bad reviews from people in the education establishment. One of them, I'm sure, is a professor, and the other one is a far left winger. That's the one. I mean, really, they come there to do hit pieces on me. I mean,
yeah, he said that your comment that many of these educators from the 1950s were motivated by wanting to help Russia win the Cold War, you're a John Bircher, and Saving K through 12 wasn't written to further our knowledge about the failures of education. It was written as propaganda. Hopefully, your target market, the barely literate, will have the common sense to look beyond your words. That's not a very persuasive argument.
Well, look, the thing is, I'm pretty aggressive in the things I write, and I slap these people around some, and they slap me around some, and I don't know. Probably it's fair, right? I have to hope there's people read it and say, oh, I think Bruce Price is right. I mean, it's the same thing with Russia and this other stuff going on. If you think Maxine Waters has got something to say, listen to her. That person you were just reading, that's Maxine Waters in the world of education.
Yeah, you got a good point. I mean, Maxine Waters was on the radio this morning, and I said, there are people who get kicked off Twitter for doing a lot less than a congressperson in the United States of America. So at what point do we look at the standard and say, this is not just a person doing something that's bad, it's a bad person. Honestly, she's out of line. There should be a punishment for a congressperson engaging in that type of behavior. But maybe because our standards are so low, we look at it and say, she's just Mad Max. Or, she has a certain electorate and a certain demographic class that looks at her as a hero, so we don't punish her. I think it's nonsense. I think she's got to go.
Well, she's being punished because Trump keeps getting more popular. I mean, apparently the liberals are insane. They're really being punished every day.
Well, there's that, and my problem is that you've got the Steve Scalise shooting, the guy from the Freedom Research Council who literally went in to the building and tried to kill as many people as he could because he said that he saw the SPLC mark them as a hate group. And then, not only that, I read this morning, I've forgotten about it, he took a bag full of Chick-fil-A sandwiches so he could smash them in the face of his victims after he shot them. these are the most susceptible of society. And you've also written some articles about how school actually makes these people worse and not better. So rather than harp on that over and over again, I can show the data. I can show people evidence to numbers from the DOE of the failing state of our education system. Thomas Sowell said that if aliens came down from outer space and looked at the last 30 years of our history, their only assumption would be that we did this on purpose. So what do we do?
Yeah, wait a minute, that's key. On purpose, because John Dewey didn't talk dreams, he said this is what we do on purpose. That's why it's parasitic relationship.
So what do we do? What's the, how long is it going to take to fix the problem, and how do we do? As a parent, I think I have a pretty good idea. But in general, how do we turn the Titanic around?
Well, I don't think all this theorizing and talking that people do, I think it's all meaningless. I'm sorry to be cynical, but I even think it's done on purpose to keep everybody distracted. Like I told you, you make a list of the 20 things everybody talks about. I say do them, you can do them all, and nothing will change. The only way you can change it, I'm being a little simplistic, but okay,
sure.
I'll go with it.
It's fine.
Ordinary Americans have to understand what's actually happened. Why don't kids know how to read? Sight words. Why don't they know any general knowledge? Because it's not taught. And it's not taught efficiently with constructivism. It's not taught on purpose because of self-esteem. And cooperative learning is where every kid's in a group of 6 people working around the table. So nobody's responsible for their work. Nobody has pride of doing something, and nobody feels responsible for the failures. There's a wonderful, oh damn, you got to be careful when you ask me. There's one little video by a woman named M.J. McDermott, the weather lady in Seattle, who wrote the response to reform math, and she had gotten out of college, become a weather lady, and then she wanted to go back. She needed a degree, and she said the biggest thing that struck her after 20 years away from school was that when you sit down at a table with these people now, nobody can do a problem by themselves. They look to the left to see what that person's doing, they look to the right to see what that person's doing, and then they finally decide how to proceed, because that's called cooperative learning. But mostly in life, we have to make decisions and do work by ourselves. So this is crippling the whole society. I think all of this stuff is brilliantly thought out to kind of pretend. Gosh, I wish I could think of some good examples, but I mean, communism always pretends to care about the people, and then the people are living in pigsties and eating, dirt off the ground. In the case of the Ukrainians starved to death in 1932, 33. I mean, that's an absolute typical thing. You've got Stalin claiming to do wonderful things for the Russians and for the USSR, but in fact he starved 6 or 7 million people, which is a very slow, horrible death, and he did that deliberately. And I say that, like I think you say on purpose, And by the way, going back to those figures you gave in AEP, they always say that 30% of the people are proficient. You got to turn that around. What they're saying is 2/3 of the people are below proficient. I've never quite understood what proficient means, but below proficient sounds very bad to me.
It does.
And they're telling you right out loud that 4th graders, 2/3 below proficient, 8th graders, 2/3 below proficient, and then all the way through the end. 2/3. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. I Jesus doesn't mind I said that. It's just crazy. Every year, it's only 2/3 above. 1/3 is proficient, 2/3 are not.
And a cost of $15,000 per year per student. $15,000. I don't know what a private tutor costs, but $15,000. One of the commenters, Loud Resistance, just said Little House on the Prairie band. I'd forgotten about that. I read that yesterday. I'm sure you could give us a list of all the other things that we can't read or learn in school anymore. But you actually, while we wrap, Bruce, you talked about an article or you wrote an article that I liked, where you mentioned Ayn Rand and the Comprachicos. Can you elaborate on that idea?
Yeah, that was quite an adventure, I have to tell you, because I saw Ayn Rand long ago when I was in college, but I wasn't a fan of hers. And somebody wrote me, a fan or a semi-fan, and said, I think you'd like this article. And boy, I tried to struggle through it. It's 17,000 words, the densest thing you ever saw. I mean, this is like super intellectual writing in the 5th gear, And I finally said, there's some stuff in here I can use. I'm just going to take it to absolute best parts and create an article for American Thinker, and it'll introduce people to Ayn Rand. So she didn't just say progressivism is bad. She told why it's bad, how it scrambles up their brains. It's really the most profound thing I've ever read about education. But the article is basically inaccessible to anybody but except another super intellectual. I mean, she didn't take mercy at all. Ayn Rand just said, I'm going to write 17,000 words. You won't understand it. It's above you because you're a peasant. And she wrote this thing. And I don't know whoever saw it or tiny numbers of people ever saw it or finished it. So I thought I could do a really nice thing by just taking out the best 1,000 words and presenting that to the public and, you know, explaining it a little. And I think people enjoyed it.
What was her case?
I get a lot of comments on American Thinker. Sometimes 400 or 500. People take the time because they talk about their kids and their family and what was happening when they were growing. You really learn all about America through by the comments on American Thinker. I have to say that.
That's good. That's good. What is a Comprachico for those that don't know?
What is the what?
The Comprachico. What is a Comprachico?
Oh, a child seller. Oh, I'm sorry. You want the background on it? It was from.
Yeah, if no one's read the article. Well, maybe someone has, but they're watching this.
Who wrote the Count of Monte Cristo?
Victor Hugo.
Yeah, he wrote a book called. It had a section in it. This is how weird it is. This is a super graduate school intellectual about the child sellers, or the child traders.
Sure.
Because 400 or 500 years ago, these people, not just gypsies, but apparently other people, would kidnap children and then mutilate them in various ways. So they would be gymnasts or prostitutes or whatever, and are stunted and all kinds of different things they would do to them. And it was very, very brutal and systematic. And you would make this freak and monsters is the word they use. Victor Hugo talks about the monsters that have been created on purpose. And I said, what Ayn Rand was saying is our progressive educators are making monsters on purpose by manipulating the children, just as these people did 400 years ago that Victor Hugo writes about. It's an amazing thing to put all that stuff together. I mean, I don't know. I didn't do it, so I mean, I'm just an explainer here, you know, a transmitter. But I was so amazed that Ayn Rand saw this thing and immediately said, this is the most profound explanation of our karate schools, something Victor Hugo wrote 400 years ago. And she was able to see all of this in there, that what they do. Like she says one thing really interesting, and I'm still thinking about it. She said, the more difficult something is, the more it should be taught from the earliest day straight through. And a lot of schools will say, our children aren't ready for this. That's one of the big themes for the last 80 years. They didn't want to teach anything. They systematically would avoid teaching. I mean, John Dewey had a secret group up at Columbia that was advocating for not teaching reading until the 4th grade. Well, that tells you where his heart was. So anyway, what's the other great thing? The other insight that really fascinated me, she said, children have only a vague interest in other children. For the most part, they want people who know something. Otherwise, they're wasting their time. And really, I was totally stunned by that. You know, because what progressivism does is make children play together as a group, where the only thing you see around you is other kids just as dumb as you are. And a kid knows that instinctively, that he's wasting his time hanging around with all these losers or other kids. And Ayn Rand saw all that. And I just thought it was wonderful. So that tells me, you want to start teaching the kids right away. I mean, it's the stuff on one thing, YouTube. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I seem to learn about half the world on YouTube. There are all these 4-year-old piano players and rock and roll singers, and they're all around the world because some kids they've got it and they can go. And so you're not hurting the kid to let the kid go. You're helping the kid. You know, and anyway, I think I love that article. A little deep, I admit, but a little weird to bring Ayn Rand. And some people, they hate Ayn Rand for some reason, so they just see Ayn Rand. Well, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But I wasn't pushing Ayn Rand because I'm not in. That whole thing with everything is money and the dollar sign. She wore the jewelry, on her sweater. She would always have a dollar sign. Yeah, so I mean, she was your basic. Just old school, total intellectual, the kind of person who could write a PhD every year for the rest of their life, PhD dissertation. I mean, there are those among us who could do this. And anyway, I enjoyed reading that, studying that thing, but I was quite defeated. I almost said, I haven't got time or patience to wade through 17,000 words that I'm not understanding and I'm not able to retain. Little by little, I copy, paste, put the stuff together and assemble it until I finally got an article. And I think most people would enjoy it, but that's the basic thing.
I'll link to it. I'll link to your basically your American Thinker article where you sift from it. And I was thinking as you were talking that I think I've either written or spoken about this in the past, that when you're a child, you have this innate desire to drive, right? Or not drive physically, but to drive, to be ambitious, to do things you haven't done before. Talking, walking, eating, the entire world is this big adventure. And that progressivism is designed to replace that with a different type of drive. and in some cases it's a malicious or malevolent replacement. And I think about that as you talk about the Comprachicos, and you were talking about mutilating these kids. Remember the movie Slumdog Millionaire, where they were blinding the children so they could profit off their singing abilities, but they would make them fully dependent? It's one of those types of things where...
That's interesting. I did not see that, but the way you described it, it sounds very appropriate.
Well, I totally ruined it for you. I'm sorry. That's spoiler alert. If you watch the movie, one of the gangsters they escape from is taking little kids and bringing... They're orphans, so he brings them in, he feeds them, he clothes them, he teaches them how to sing, and then once he figures out if they have a talent that he can exploit, he makes them fully dependent, blinds them, sticks acid in their eyes, whatever.
Okay, that's like the Comprachicos.
Yeah, it's very similar. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at we'll kind of wrap this up here. I'm looking at the table of contents in your book to see if there's anything important that I missed, and see if we can talk about other reasons people should go out and get it and be exposed to some of your ideas. But also, as we were talking, there was one other thing that popped out at me that I definitely want to touch on, and now I think I might have forgotten what it was. So, dang it. You said something that really stuck out in my mind. So let's kind of look at the ideas here. You talk about the culture war, the reading wars, the math war, 100 years of dumbing down America, Common Core, literary flights, guilty. You know what? I think maybe it was just illiteracy. I read one of your articles recently where you talked about we're becoming illiterate as a nation, and when you look at the literacy of certain areas and demographics, they're literally I mean, the stat I said earlier about 7% of black kids can do math and 17% can read. They're still graduating at a rate of about 80% on average. So what they're basically doing is ignoring the kids' achievement and saying, well, no child left behind, on to the next thing. Hey, hopefully college can fix it. And then hopefully the Fortune 500 with their $3 billion in remedial English money can fix it. And what we're finding is it's just not fixed. People are just accepting a lower standard of what it means to be educated. Which is someone who doesn't have a college degree, I deal with every day in the corporate America, because they look at me and say, well, he's not educated. And what does this guy know? What he can't? Even though Google says that there's no correlation between education and your accomplishment in the workplace, the system still does. You're not worth as much on the open market if you didn't sit in school for those extra 4 years. So what, in terms of what's in your book, what are some other compelling reasons why people should run out and pick it up?
I think it's the best. I mean, the real big shots in our world, my world, reform, is still alive. Siegfried Engelmann, a great man, and Samuel Blumenfeld wrote 10 or 12 good books, all of them worth reading. And there's not too many others, but the point is these guys write these books. I'm more of a generalist, and I don't focus on one thing. I focus on all of them and try to give you a 200-page sweep of the thing. In fact, some people would say this. I could cut some of those pages out, but I mean, the point was, I wanted to get. I really believe that you don't understand anything in education until it's explained 3 times. I mean, this is one of the greatest stories. Is it Rudolf Flesch, when he wrote his book in 1955, Why Johnny Can't Read? He thought that he had settled the whole thing forever,
sure,
and that the educators would give up and drop out and forget their nonsense. And you know what they did? They formed the International Education Reading Association, IRA. There were 2 terrorist IRAs in our history. Anyway, he just, now 2 or 3 things came together there. The point was he thought he had settled it. He hadn't. It was unbelievable. He thought that if you say, look, it's like Chinese. You don't want to teach English like it's Chinese, right? Boom, into the discussion. I mean, this is still going around in my brain after all these years, and if you stop and think about it, you'll just be stunned. But the people, the education establishment, they're commies, if I can use that. They never stop. You got to give them credit for party organization, loyalty, efficiency, getting up every day and saying, we can change the world. We can change the world. And that's what they do. They never stop their whole lives. And so even though Rudolf Flesch had written a book saying they were all killing these kids and ruining the culture, blah, 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 they didn't back up. They didn't slow down. They just kept coming back and saying, sight words are all you need in life. Sight words are all you need in life. Sight words are all you need in life. And so many words. And they've got all the kids in colleges today, the young teachers, many websites. Most schools nowadays have a website. I found them from all over the country, you know, where they have those lists of sight words. You can get them right off the web. And it's a killer. And people can see for themselves if they would just test it. And they're not going to get very far. At the end of 1st grade, you should be, according to all, my best little video is called Reading is Easy. And it's quotes from 7 or 8 famous people. And they all use the word easy. I mean, these people didn't know each other independently. They say, oh, yeah, you can do it in 4 or 5 months. Oh, you can do it in 3 months. Oh, you can do it in 6 weeks or whatever. They all said it was easy. And yet everybody in the education establishment says, oh, reading is so difficult. Oh, my God, some kids just can't do it for that early. They need a couple more years. And they just lie all the time. But according to the phonics people, 99% will learn to read in the first grade. Hey, by the way, I never know when. One of the advantages, you're looking at a clock. I'm not. How much time we got?
We're about done. So we've gone over, but it's been enjoyable. I want to give you the last word, and I want to make sure that everyone knows I'm going to link to your book, Saving K through 12. I will link to some of your YouTube videos, and I haven't seen the one yet called Education as a Neurotoxin. Perhaps I should have before we started, but I'm going to have all those in the description.
Pretty bold phrase, wouldn't you say?
It is. We should have talked about that. That's a pretty heavy claim that it's actually.
Yeah, it's just 3 minutes, and I can sum up the whole thing.
Sure.
See, I can make these graphics because I used to be an advertising guy, and I can organize things. I'm a novelist, and so somewhere in there, my literary site we'll have to go to Saving K-12. The link that's at the bottom of the articles. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If people show any interest in anything, that's good. It's a positive. One of the problems, very frustrating, is that the average American does not care about education. There's just too many things to care about. You got to care about the whale, and you got to care about this, and you got to care about that. And so somebody says, "Oh, you should care about education." Oh, yeah, come on, man. I'm worn out. I just want to watch TV. So I understand that. But what I would promise in return is it's simpler than people think. Understanding I can do constructivism. I did it in 5 minutes. If I did it in 10 minutes, you'd never look back. Self-esteem, same thing. Cooperative learning, same thing. You see that there's a mentality or a vindictive mentality in all of these things because when the smoke clears, the kids are dumber. That's it. Everything they do in American education, when the smoke clears at the end of the day of the year, whatever, the kids are dumber.
That's true.
And really, I mean, it's an amazing thing what we've done to tens of millions of children. The official figure I use is 50 million functional illiterates. They can read in some sense, but reading is a struggle because they never get fluent. And you see these teenage boys saying, "Oh, I hate books. I don't like reading." Well, I mean, screw those kids. I'm sorry to put it that way. They can't actually read. So when somebody says, who doesn't know how to swim says, "I hate swimming," it really doesn't mean very much. But they think they might know how to read because they memorized 200 or 300 sight words with kind of, what would you say, half competence, half, well, I want to say completion of the task, and they just don't. And see, the schools, it's so much more complicated than what we've talked about. The whole school is set up to be a loony bin. You got public address system. You got people coming in and out. You've got people with weird schedules. You got this. If they don't turn in their homework, the teacher says, "Well, do better next time," and on and on and on it goes. Precision. They not only undermine their academic skills, they also undermine their character. Oh, so you were late. Oh, so you didn't do your homework. Oh, so this. Oh, so that. There's no repercussions. There's no excellence. There's no pride. These kids, I mean, really, who are the ones in the military with the pride? It's the Marines. It's the people who are really good at something and can kick ass. Those people are very proud of what they do. Now, if you're in an Army unit that's in the back line and everybody knows it's pathetic, you're not very proud of that, even though you're there. And I was in the Army, and I remember the barracks thought it had the toughest sergeant was the one that had the highest esprit de corps. Anyway, so how can you be proud of the schools and you're not learning anything? You don't know anything. You can see it every day in the news and in the quiz shows and things. So anyway, we could do a lot better. We could save money. We could have better schools at less cost, and we simply have to it's a reversal operation. We don't add anything. We get rid of. But by the way. Number 65, How They Wrecked the Schools. That's an article, and you could just Google it by itself. Number 65, How They Wrecked the Schools. Oh, I gave this speech in Milan in October, and I gave the speech to them, Sins in American Education. I think I gave that list of stuff, and it's very simple thing. I just flash back out to Milan and the whole thing, but they systematically dumbed the schools down, and I said, you just have to pull these things back out, and that's what that article is: How They Wreck the Schools, How They Keep Them Wrecked. Number 6, I think it's 6.5, and it's a very good article because all this stuff I've been writing about, 100,000 words, I got it down to like 20 good ideas extinguished, 20 bad ideas introduced. They're like viruses on your computer. They stick them in the school system like constructivism and sight words. And little by little, they do their damage. And the only way you're going to fix a computer with viruses is somebody has to take the viruses out. Put them in the trash, problem solved. No work, no money, no nothing. Everything's simpler and cheaper. But our schools are so full of this stuff, and nobody is got the sense of the composure of the world recognition or whatever, what's going on, that all this stuff is just garbage. Just get rid of it. It's like they hung weights on all these kids. They show up in the first grade and they hang a 10-pound weight on one shoulder. Okay, kid, walk straight. Why aren't you standing up straight? It's like that's the relationship from then on. So I think we could do really a lot. I don't know if I'm Pollyannish about this or I could prove it, but I think that education is really so elemental. I think there are schools under tents and lean-tos and old garages all around the world, the jungles of South America, where you've got some serious young person who's a teacher, and the students sit there and listen and nod, and those kids are learning 10 times what our kids are learning in big fancy schools. I think it's pretty obvious because the kids want to know, and the teacher wants to teach, and the whole community, the ethos, the sensibility of the neighborhood is kids are there to teach, there to learn, and if they don't learn, you crack down on them a little. You don't put up with anything back. This is a great closing story. I had a good-looking girlfriend from Long Island years ago up in New York,
okay.
And she wanted to be a teacher, and she went to tell her principal that she needed some help in the classroom. She was young and sexy, and they had seventh graders. You could just predict what would happen. And the principal looks at her and says, "Sorry, that's your problem. The classroom is your responsibility." And I knew right then, this is 30 years ago, I knew right then that the whole thing was ridiculous. That teacher was the problem. That principal. He and the people who let him get away with that. Because when I went to school, a good private school, the headmaster would come into the classroom and sit there and stare at everybody if they weren't behaving. And nobody messed around. Or if they did mess around, they knew they were messing around and getting away with something. And so, anyway, you need to back up your teachers. In fact, I'm the best friend teachers have got. That's the irony of all this. If the schools did what I said, the teachers would all have a dream life because everything would be well behaved and the kids would learn and everybody would feel satisfied and proud of what they were doing instead of ashamed and a little bit uncomfortable. Hey, we covered a lot of ground. I give us credit.
We did. I think you talked about getting biblical earlier. There's a parable in the Bible about the two servants, and I think about that when you say, look, nothing we're doing is working, right? So you have one servant who's asked to do something, he says, nope, don't want to do it, then later repents and does it. You have the other servant who says, yeah, I'm all game, and then goes out and doesn't do it. Which of them twain did his will, right? So when we talk about educating students, it's just not getting done, regardless of what people say they want to happen, regardless of the amount of money they're spending, regardless of their intentions. Where students are getting dumber every year. So I want to have you on to talk about that. I would encourage people to go look in the links that I will put below in the YouTube page to make sure you can see all the other things that Bruce has produced over the years. Go to improve-education.org, and also the videos and other authors he mentioned will be linked as well once the stream is over. So Bruce, I appreciate your time. Are you on social media, or do you strictly to the websites?
I've got two Facebook pages. I don't know how to take advantage of it. I'm on Twitter. I don't know how to take advantage of that either.
All right, we'll let people figure that out then. But what's that?
Well, if you just say somebody's name in Facebook, they'll give you one or two or three choices, and one of them is it. I use each of them in different ways. Because I don't really know how to. LinkedIn. I'm also on. LinkedIn, is that social media? I guess it is, right?
It is. More business. It's business Facebook, but certainly it's useful. So I appreciate your time and insights.
No, but here's the thing. Bruce Deitrick Price is a unique name in America, just because of the spellings of the three words. So if you enter Bruce Deitrick Price, you're going to get pages of all these things where I'm doing things. So it's very easy to find this stuff.
All right.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. I appreciate you inviting me. You read my article, so I knew I didn't have to persuade you about anything or decide what we were going to do, what canvas, what part of the terrain we were going to touch. You'd already decided that you liked it, so it made the whole thing very pleasant.
Well, I wish you the best out there, and we'll hope to touch base with you soon, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yes, thank you.